everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Attendance Bias. I am your host, Brian Weinstein. When I first began collecting tapes, I would always keep my eyes out for Phish shows at Jones Beach. Having grown up on Long Island, going to concerts at Jones Beach was a summer tradition. It didn't even matter who was playing, because the venue was a 10-minute drive for me, and on a nice night, it's one of the best outdoor venues in New York. So you can imagine my reaction when I found out that my new favorite band had played Jones Beach a number of times. It was with that genuine delight and natural curiosity that I approached today's guest, Jonathan Frederic, about his chosen show, July 23rd, 1993. Phish's first time headlining their own show at Jones Beach. 1993 was an amazing time to learn about Phish, as they were just dipping their toes into the water to jump from the small theaters they were playing to larger amphitheaters, a transition that would continue for approximately the next 2 years. During that time, the band was also introducing new music from Rift, beginning their craziest musical exploration and experimentation, and creating new ways to connect with the audience, as they couldn't maintain unmiked a cappella performances and the big ball jam in these sprawling arenas and amphitheaters. It was a pleasure to hear a first-person account from someone who experienced all of these changes in one show, especially at my one-time hometown venue. So let's join Jonathan to talk about when to eat carbohydrates, ending up front row center at the venue, and the Pixies, as we go over July 23rd, 1993 at the Jones Beach Amphitheater. Jonathan, welcome to Attendance Bias. How are you?
I'm good, Brian. Good to hear from you.
Good to have you on the show today. You picked a show that, honestly, I didn't know about, but I feel a little bad about that because I should, because it's at my former hometown venue, my growing up hometown venue. That show is July 23rd, 1993 at Jones Beach, the Jones Beach Amphitheater in Wantagh. And I grew up as a Long Islander. When I was collecting tapes, I was always thrilled when I found a tape from Jones Beach, and I didn't realize that they played Jones Beach this early in their career.
Yeah, I think this would have been their first headlining act in the amphitheater, in the Northeast that summer. But I mean, I had no knowledge of them, where they would be in the world at this point, up until this show.
Right. Well, I mean, Jones Beach, and I think that both of us are Long Island guys. Jones Beach is a big place. I mean, it's been bigger since this date, since 93. They added that mezzanine at the very top. But even back then in 1993, it was a large place for a band like Phish to play. They weren't even playing the Beacon Theater yet.
No, I mean, so at the time, I had seen, so to me, in my mind, Phish was the biggest band I was going to see. Every other band I had seen had been like the Roseland, Beacon Theater, something like that. So the fact that they were playing a big theater, I knew nothing about them. I just assumed that they were already at that level.
Right. And about a year later, they would be, right? A year later, they're playing Boston Garden for New Year's Eve.
Correct.
Yeah. So, and we'll get into this, what Phish was like in 1993, but you saw them probably right before that big jump, or right at the beginning, I guess I should say, at that big jump from theaters to amphitheaters. And I guess the New York City area, which Jones Beach technically is a part of, was a place to do it. But before we get into the nuts and bolts of that, let's hear about you, Jonathan, as a Phish fan, with the Attendance Bias Lightning Round.
Attendance Bias Lightning Round.
Jonathan, when was your first Phish show, and what do you remember from it?
So this was my first Phish show. And I guess, I mean, I can get into the specifics of it now, or we can just go through it. But this was my very first experience for Phish, other than hearing Antelope one time.
Oh, when did you hear Antelope?
So that was about 2 weeks before this show. So we were down at the beach, a bunch of friends of mine. Some of them were doing some psychedelics, and some strangers happened upon us when somebody was having sort of a bad experience. And they mentioned that if we go get some bread, carbohydrates will be good for them. So my friend Jason and I, we hopped in the car with them. They said, we'll drive to our house. We'll get you a loaf of bread. And they just happened to simultaneously put on Antelope, which, had no idea what that was. And it basically played for about the length of the trip to get the bread and back. And then they kind of told us who the band was. I don't even know if they mentioned that they were playing soon, but they just told us to go see them live.
Good advice. I don't know about the
Yes.
carbohydrates. I don't know if that's good advice.
Yeah, who knows if the scientific theory, I don't think it even ever got to fruition. I think someone just ate the loaf of bread, but, it was a good attempt. And it was good, it was fortuitous for me.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm saying. So if way back in 93 was your first Phish show, what was your most recent show? And what did you think of it?
My most recent show was the 2nd of August this year, 2023. I thought it was awesome. I mean, it was unbelievable. I hadn't been in a while. I think the previous one I'd gone to before that was New Year's 2011. So it had been a while.
Oh, wow.
But it was fantastic. Unbelievable.
Going back to our Long Island heritage, I figure that Jones Beach, at least for me, I remember lining up outside the Pathmark drugstore, I think in May probably, or maybe it was even before that, April, and they would release the schedule, right, every year, and then you had to line up to get your wristbands for the Ticketmaster stand in the back of the store and all that. I have such fond memories of it. I saw so many shows at Jones Beach. I imagine you have too. What's your favorite memory of seeing a show at Jones Beach other than Phish?
I saw Santana in 2000, which was a great show. That was when he was doing that sort of like comeback where he was with all the pop acts and stuff like that. And I think a bunch of them came out. Thought it was a cool show. And then the other one I remember there is I think I was at Lollapalooza 92 and it got rained out and it was insane there. Like as we almost all got blown away before they canceled the show. So that's my other really crazy memory of Jones Beach.
I remember in the summer of 2000, The Who played. Also, they were on their like 9th retirement tour or whatever it was.
Right.
And I remember that summer, it was compared to previous ones, like when they did Quadrophenia in 96, they had a relatively small band. It was only like 6 people on stage, which for The Who is a small band. And they just blew it away. And it was raining also. It was raining, but Pete Townsend smashed his guitar at the end. And
so you got the classic.
Yeah. I remember thinking I could die happy now, even though he's in his 60s at the time. I'm thinking, all right, I saw Pete Townsend smash a guitar on stage. I've seen The Who now. Exactly. I can count it.
Exactly.
Sticking with this theme, what's your favorite Long Island venue other than Jones Beach?
I would say out here in Amagansett, the Stephen Talkhouse, small bar, but a lot of people have played out there. Sirius has used it. I think Dave Matthews Band played there for an event they had and stuff. It's just a cool, small bar that's had a lot of great bands over the years.
For people listening who are not as familiar with the geography at Jones Beach, where is Amagansett?
Oh, so sorry about that. That's about an hour and a half east, far, far out on the island. As you know, because Long Island sort of like, as it goes out east, it, sort of dissipates out in population.
Right. And those of you listening, if you have a friend who lives either in New York City or on Long Island, and they say, you mentioned a town, they go, oh, that's out east. That means it's like pretty darn far. It's like at least an hour driving. And even like I live closer to New York City, or I grew up closer to New York City. So to me, out east was still like central Long Island. Right.
Well, it's the same thing. Yeah, when you're coming the other way, it's the same thing. Going up island, you don't actually go that far before you consider it up island.
Right. It's not just the name. Long Island is quite a long island.
Exactly.
What is the weirdest thing you've ever seen at a Phish show, Jonathan?
When Kid Rock performed with Phish in 2000 in Vegas. That was weird. That was weird.
I've always heard mixed results about that. There are people who say that, it's disgusting. He's a misogynist. He shouldn't be on stage. Then there are people, and this is the bane of my show, who say if you were there, it was the most fun thing in the world. Where do you fall on that?
Right. I fall on that. Well, first of all, I mean, it was like Kid Rock was a different person in 2000 than he is now. It has not aged well. And then, at the time, I just thought it was hilarious because it seemed like the most Vegas thing you could do. Like, here, we're going to bring out Kid Rock. I think in the moment, it felt more like a Trey thing than the other band members were maybe really into it. But it played well. In the room, it played well. Immediately afterwards, it did not. But in the room, it played well.
That's kind of like how, I don't know if you were at the Brooklyn show in 2004. That's kind of how the Jay-Z appearance played out.
Yeah. No, I was at the night before. I missed that. I was at the night before that.
The way I experienced it, I mean, I have a lot of respect, tremendous respect for Jay-Z and his music. He certainly hasn't morphed into the cartoon that Kid Rock has,
No.
far from it. But it
Right.
was weird that in the minute, because his appearance, I think, is about 12 or 15 minutes, Jay-Z's.
Right.
And it was like around right after the excitement of seeing this enormous celebrity show up, about 7 minutes into the first song, which I think it's 99 Problems, it kind of like everyone started looking around and being like, oh, how much longer? Like, this is a little
Right.
too weird.
Yeah,
But
exactly. I mean, I think even with the Kid Rock one, if they had encored like without him, that probably would have like, saved it from people's perspective. But they do what they want to do. That's what makes them great.
When was this show played?
Well, taking a look out, looking at the summer of 1993, this is one of the earlier shows that guests have chosen for attendance bias. So I'm really thrilled to talk about it. And when you look at the summer of 1993, the first thing that comes to mind for me is August 93. It's widely seen as one of the band's hottest runs, comparable to November 97 or December 95. The summer 93 tour was notable for, at least the way I look at it, several observable changes in the band's musical evolution. And also, like we discussed, their overall growth. Like, they played 15 shows in July, which was exclusively a Northeast run. Then they went to the Southeast. It would continue into August. And the band was mostly still playing small turn-of-the-century theaters and like 1930s WPA community centers in the parts of the country where they were less popular, which is almost anywhere except the Northeast Corridor and New England. But this summer tour was the first time that they would start to book, like we talked about, these headlining amphitheaters, some of which they still play today. If you look at their itinerary in the summer of 93, there's The Man, there was Today's Show at Jones Beach, Great Woods, Darien Lake, and a few that they would arrive at and then outgrow, like Red Rocks and the Greek in Berkeley, although I shouldn't talk like that because they just played it this past summer. 1994 would continue this growth on a much more confident level, but they were just dipping their toes in the water during the summer of 93. What do you remember about the scene at that time?
I don't remember anything of the scene at that time because when I got to the show, I got there simultaneous to them starting to play. So I missed the entire lot scene. We'll get to that as we get into the show why I missed the scene so much. Me personally, like I said, I was not at all attuned into Phish at all. I was, 17 and a half. Had been to the concert I'd been to had been like Jesus and Mary Chain, Pixies, Primus, Tool, like Lollapalooza. So yeah, I was in the grunge vein, I guess, alternative music vein, and then I found Phish, which was the most alternative you could get to.
Right. I was going to say, you were pretty hip. You had some pretty good taste.
I had cool friends, luckily. I guess that's what I should say.
Coming back to the summer of 93, musically, the summer featured the debut of 2001, which was mostly played as a show or a set opener. 2001 became this amazing jam monster in like 96 or 97. But for the most part, it was like a 3-minute set opener. Yeah.
So just about that, so with that show, when I listen back, I think it's like about 1:13 until like they're the first time, through the chord progression or something. And then so the next show I saw after this was, I didn't see them again until 98, and they opened with 2001. And I went back and looked at that show, and it was like 7 minutes until they got through the first chord progression. So that's basically the difference.
Yeah, but it's always been popular. It's always been consistent. Yeah. It also featured the debut of Daniel Saw the Stone, as well as their a cappella arrangement of Freebird, if you've been lucky enough to see that one.
I did see that one at this. Yeah, I saw that in, 98 Albany, the night before Thanksgiving. Yeah, Freebird. That was in the encore. Along with Something, which they should bring back by the Beatles.
Oh, yeah.
Page kills it.
Yeah,
Page kills that song.
Yeah, that 98. I know that was the summer of covers, but they also kept developing them in the fall.
Right.
Yeah. If you haven't heard
of that show, they played Ben Caught Stealing that night. So yeah, they were still doing their whole surprise covers. Although that had been played a bunch of times.
Right. And more importantly, it seemed like Phish was kind of cutting ties with the routines they developed over the course of their career. What I mean by that is they were like breaking rules they had already established. So in 93, or summer of 93, especially, I Am Hydrogen was no longer a given after Mike's song. It was by the summer of 1993 when the audience participation claps of Stash would then like insert themselves into the song. Like you may or may not know about it, but by the end of the year, it was definitely part of the song and it would really become cemented in 94. And then really the band began to indulge basically every musical idea that came into their heads, which either had great results or sometimes huge fall on their faces. But it did allow them greater freedom during improvisation. You could hear it during like the Murat Gin or the 8/14/93 show at Tinley Park, where they might hear an option or an opening to go into Purple Rain or a tease of another song, and they would just automatically do it without stopping. They were like at the height of their powers here.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
So you already said that you were 17 years old during this summer. You were not into the Grateful Dead. It seems like you were, like you said, more into alternative music. I
had no reference point for the Grateful Dead. I mean, I knew of the Grateful Dead. I've been like exposed in terms of the music, but in terms of like into the scene at all, or into even, the reference points of like two sets and that sort of thing, like nothing. Every show I'd been to before this had been like a bunch of opening acts, and then you get 60 to 70 minutes of whatever you paid the full freight for.
It's so funny you say that because my first Phish show was in 97 and I felt similarly. Even in those 4 years throughout the 1990s, those concerts that I went to, mostly at Jones Beach probably, or Nassau Coliseum, whether it was Green Day or I don't know, Jethro Tull I saw with my dad at Jones Beach with Emerson, Lake and Palmer opening.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. But it was the ticket price with an opening band or two, and Stone Temple Pilots, I remember, and an opening band or two, and then it was just one long set. So that whole concept of 2 set shows was alien to me. So it seems like it doesn't matter whether it was early or late 90s. It's just more a matter of lifestyle and musical preference.
Right. Exactly. And for me, more music is always better.
I agree. Why, of all the shows that you've seen, why did you pick this show? Why do you have attendance bias toward July 23rd at Jones Beach?
Yeah, so I have attendance bias for this show because basically, at this point, I had zero knowledge of what Phish was, except, like I said, I had heard Antelope, 2 weeks, a week before, I can't remember. And then I was talking to my buddy Jason, who I went to the show with the other day, because we were trying to remember how we even found the show. And either the people told us there was a show coming at Jones Beach, or maybe like the Village Voice or something. And we saw an ad in there in a newspaper. This is so ancient now. So I think we just decided to go, which was difficult for us because I don't think we had cars or anything. Anyway, we convinced his girlfriend to drive us in her car. So like I said, it's about 90 minutes from where we are out east to Jones Beach. And we leave and we get about, 10 miles into the trip and the car kaputs completely. Oh. But luckily we're in front of this gas station. And so we kind of roll the car up there and the guy's like, yeah, the fuel line is shot. Like, there's nothing to do. And he's like, well, I could put this nail right here and you're probably good for the weekend. And of course we were like, sounds great. So hop back in the car, but now we're late. And so, by the time we get to the show, the scene is, I don't know, I would assume the scene is over because I don't know how much of a scene outside would have been like, because I don't think it was sold out. Anybody who wanted to go in could have gotten in, and that will come clear very quickly. So we didn't have tickets. Also, I should have mentioned that. So as we go up, we run up to the box office and my friend's like, yeah, we want front row center. And the guy's like, sure. And we think he's kidding. And as he's handing us the tickets, they start playing, which I, at the time I wouldn't have known what it was, but it was Buried Alive. And we head in, and I remember I think that the security not was tight, but they were like not confused by what Phish, like what all these people were suddenly going crazy about. So I remember the security being very like frazzled by everything that was going on. And they just kept like putting us closer, 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 closer to the stage, closer to the stage. I think at this point, I asked my buddies, like, yeah, Buried Alive is over. They're into Ripped now. And so basically, by the time we're done, we are like third row center, like center. You couldn't be closer to the middle of like a perfect seat to see Phish from than there. So basically, I chose this show because if you put any person who would eventually become a Phish fan in this position at any show, they're going to love it. I mean, that's it.
Set 1.
Well, let's get into it with set 1 because 1993 is a perfect time to become a Phish fan. I mean, you could say that to any fan now, you know, whatever year you got into it was the perfect time. But this was like the perfect transition from their song-based type 1 just explosion of music in the early 90s to just starting to jam into type 2 experimentation where, you know, you could go and get both. You could flip the coin and you don't know what's going to come up. But as you just mentioned, they open with Buried Alive. And to me, that's always a good sign. It's always a sign of a good show to come. Like, I'm loving that also. For those of you listening at home, if you want to listen to this show, the whole thing on phish.in or re-listen, there's a soundboard recording of this show, right? It's from the FM broadcast.
Yeah, that's another reason I chose this, because I mean, it's just to go to an early show and then just to have it's a great recording of it. I mean, you can really hear everybody so clearly.
Yeah, I also think that this might have been the last tour that Paul Languedoc let tapers plug directly into the soundboard.
Yeah, I saw that because on Phish, I can't remember where I saw it. Someone was saying whether they couldn't figure out whether it was a soundboard recording or if it was an FM simulcast. I don't, so who I'm not really sure, but it sounds great. That's all I know.
Yeah, it does. And there's some intense soloing at about a minute. The song is just about over. It's just like a 2-minute Buried Alive. And it might be a good time to note that even though they play 12 songs in this set and 11 songs in set 2, each set is just about an hour. It's kind of a shorter show.
It's definitely the shortest show I've been to. Everything is so fast. Everything is so fast. Like intentionally fast. It feels like they might have dates in Boston waiting for them. I mean, it's only 2 hours and 12 minutes total. If you like intentional, like just on point Phish, I mean, you can't ask for anything more than that. I don't even think they make a mistake in the show. Is there a flub at all? Other than, I mean, if they do, the other guys cover it up as quickly as they can. I mean, it's their one brain at this show. And that's why it's like, you can see in this show, August is coming, basically.
Yeah, good point. Good point. After Buried Alive is Rift, which I realized as I was listening, it's from their newly released album. Right? A lot of these songs, the songs weren't new, but the album was new.
Right. Yeah, the album was new. And to me, like, I mean, we'll get to it, but the first 5 songs of the show is just showing off, basically. I mean, it's like boom, 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 boom. Yeah. Because Rift, I've heard Rift 1,000 times. That day, I had heard it. This was the first time I'm hearing it. I don't know if you can find a better version to hear the first time you're going to hear it from 10 feet away. I mean...
Yeah, it's incredible. And it's not just the instrumentation, although that is perfect. There's also their vocal harmonies are right on
great.
point.
I was just gonna say, if you love Page, like this is a great first set for you because there's a lot of Page all over here.
I agree. And to go back to what you just said about, getting every note right or they're perfect. One of my notes was for fans to whom getting every note right is important. This is a good time to be a Phish fan. Like this really solidified it for me. Like Page's solo at about 3 minutes, it's not crazily different from any other piano solo from Rift at the time, but it was new. So you could feel that excitement, that youth of the song.
Yeah. I mean, that song, like even when you're listening to it, it feels like it's almost like it's getting faster as they're. I mean, it's a great version of it. I mean, all the songs on this are just really great versions. I mean, is there something that's going to blow your mind? Not necessarily, but if you love good, solid, great, tight Phish, there's not a song here that misses a beat.
Yeah, there's something to be said for that too. Everyone, whether it's now or even in the late 90s, where everyone considers Phish I'm using air quotes if you're listening, a jam band, but they don't really jam that much in this show. They play.
I don't even think I had a perception of them as a jam band at that. Like I said, I didn't know what to expect. So, like, I think if they had played like a 25-minute song, I probably would have killed myself. But for what I needed that night, it was fantastic.
After Rift is Caravan, which is such a treat. As of today's recording, it was last played on the New Year's Eve run in 1996 on December 29th, but it was already petering out before then. I mean, you'd talk about a song list in flux. It wouldn't be long before most of these jazz standards were gone. They were mostly debuted in 1990 or 91, but they would be dropped from the regular rotation, I would say by 95, almost entirely.
Right. I mean, I wish they'd bring that back. I mean, that would work. That would work in anywhere. Caravan. I mean, you play that in MSG at New Year's this year, people will be excited.
I agree. And I wonder if because of the expansion of their venue sizes kind of caused them to pull back on the jazz standards. But I would also think, I was just going to say, I would also think that at this point in 2023, 2024, that they have their sound technology and their PA so dialed in that it kind of doesn't matter if they played jazz at Madison Square Garden. It would carry.
Exactly. No, I think that if they played that version, that would carry.
And talk about whiplash in terms of style. They went straight from Caravan, right? Old jazz to Nellie Kane, from jazz to bluegrass. Like it showed how Phish and Phish fans had big ears and wide musical palettes. I want to ask you, because the band that you mentioned that stands out to me is the Pixies. I know you said Primus as well. For you, the Pixies, I mean, this is completely on the other end. If you're into alternative rock at the time, what were you thinking in real time when you hear jazz and bluegrass?
I was thinking this is the greatest thing I've ever seen, basically. But I had, I mean, that was music I was listening to. But I had grown up in a house in which like there was not a lot of contemporary music. So it's like my dad listened to classical, opera, all world music, like all different kinds. So my ears were open to things. To me, I was like, this is alternative. Like this is literally alternative. So
it is. It's the alternative to everything else that was out there.
Right. And like if you don't like this, like in 5 seconds, you're gonna get something. I mean, that's like you said, I don't know if you said it, the schizophrenic Phish. I mean, it's just boom, boom, boom. But it's so intentional at this point. And it's like almost like I said, showing off a little bit. Like we can do this, we can do this, we can do this, and we can do it better than anybody else.
And thank God they held true to themselves, because I remember in retrospect reading a lot of contemporary reviews of their albums, like whether it's Rift or A Picture of Nectar, what have you, Lawn Boy. And the biggest criticism from professional music critics, the biggest criticism of the band at that time, I would say through Hoist, is that they couldn't pick a style.
Right.
That word schizophrenic is derogatory, that it's like they can't fit in, but the band never gave in. They still just indulged in whatever musical style they wanted to play to their benefit and to our benefit.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they never moved off, just following their own muse, which is fantastic. Thank God.
And then after Nellie Kane, they go back to Phish originals with Maze. And oh my God. Wow.
Yeah, this. I mean, the one context of the show is that, for me, is that the doors of perception are wide open at this point, and I'm literally 10 feet from this new band I just found that is about to play, one of the greatest tension and release compositions you can have, and they nailed it. Like, is it the best version ever? Who cares? It's a fantastic version.
Sounds like you ate plenty of bread before the show.
Yeah, something like that.
There's my favorite part of this maze at around 3 minutes. Mike and Paige kind of get down together, and you don't get to say that too often.
No, I mean, it's just it's a great version. Like I said, it's like there's total intentionality in how they're playing. It's like they're all moving in the same direction as one the whole time. It's crazy.
It is crazy. Like me.
And the thing, I mean, when you're at the show, because I mean, just to be that close and to see how because at the time, it was more punk than any punk I'd seen. They're moving up. I mean, those guys are like sweating like maniacs up there. I mean, you see Mike now, he's very chill. He was not chill in 1993. That man was flying around, and it was great. That's it.
Yeah, Mike taught me how to recognize every downbeat, because by the time I was seeing them, they were already selling out Madison Square Garden, and I was in what back then was the 300s.
Right.
When they had the old Madison Square Garden. And the big thing I could make out on stage was Mike's big frizzy hair bouncing on every downbeat.
Exactly. But yeah, from 10 feet away, it's just like, the sense memory is still there. It's been 30 years.
Yeah, well, you don't forget stuff like this. And at Jones Beach, where there's literally, it's not a river exactly, but there's a separation. It's like a moat between the front of the orchestra to the stage.
Right. Yeah, because I was trying to remember, because I can't, I know they've altered that the theater a bunch of times. I was trying to remember what the setup was when I was there. I mean, I can't, but I do remember I feel like there was a moat there, but I can't.
There definitely 100%. Was, because by the time I was going in 95, it was there, and unless they made a change.
So,
yeah.
I think the change was 92. So yeah, I definitely think the moat was there. That makes sense. Some of the things you'll have to fill in.
Yeah, I'll do the fact check. I'll do a deep dive into Jones Beach. And then after Maze, they play The Horse into Silent, which is a treat for the ears because, Trey, and I'd love to hear what you remember about this visually. Trey starts the horse on the acoustic guitar, but by the time they're playing Silent in the Morning, he's playing electric.
So I feel like it was on a stand, but I can't remember 100%. I feel like the acoustic was on a stand, and even then, I'm like, how did he switch so quick? Unless he had the guitar slung over his back, I don't remember. But I feel like it was on a stand because it was definitely on a stand later when Fishman plays it, which we'll get to.
Yeah. Oh man, what a treat that was. But yeah, we'll get to it. But Silent in the Morning, to your point at the beginning of our conversation, is very fast. It's a very brisk tempo.
Yeah,
You know,
I mean
it's
everything in the show is brisk. Obviously they do like long, but everything is brisk in the show. If you like brisk Phish, if you've got only 2 hours and 12 minutes to listen to Phish, this is the show for you.
Silent in the Morning still has a powerful ending back then and today again, although it's become a bit more of a rarity, I'm sorry to say, these days. After that, though, they play Punch You in the Eye, which is interesting to hear how this song plays as a mid-first set raver, at a
Yeah.
not a very crowded venue.
No, I mean it's because the other times I can think of hearing it, it's like they give that opening part so much more space to kind of fill up the room, and here they're just through it. I mean, it sounds great, but it's almost a different song than we would hear like 5 years later.
Absolutely, and it's a different song than maybe it even was 2 years earlier or 3 years earlier when it debuted, because it was more of like a weird Zappa sort of like multi-parts that didn't really fit any genre, weird song. Right. But now it's become like this rock and roll song.
And it had the landlady.
Yes, it does.
Right. Yeah. That was the part I really remember from the show. That coming in and being like, whoa, like, oh, they're going to do like a Latin jazz now. Like they do everything.
Yeah, they do. And
that's how it felt.
Yeah, at 4 minutes, there's just like a hint of this full jam improvisation that they would explore as the year went on and then really blossom in 1994.
And the dismal fall began at last to open up before my eyes, and there I saw, to my surprise.
I mean, I guess that's what I mean. It's like they would just kind of, like they were intentional going A to B, but they would just go off on these little shoots, tangents for, split seconds for bars here, 2 bars there. But they just always were in sync, completely in sync the whole time. I mean, it's crazy.
Yep. And after Punch You in the Eye would be Runaway Jim, like back-to-back really old school songs. And by the time I got into Phish, this song was kind of cemented as a set opener, usually a show opener.
Right.
Runaway Jim was. So it's fun to hear it being played toward the end of the first set. And like you could hear different members of the band playing with their kind of written parts, for lack of a better phrase. Like you could hear Mike at around, around 2 minutes, just playing with the bass line. He's moving away from it, but just for a second or two.
Yeah, I mean, it's everybody's doing these little flourishes, but they're all perfectly in sync with what everyone else is doing. I mean, you can tell. That's why I say, like, you can see sort of like the green shoots of August, but they're not fully formed yet.
Yeah, and it's still a treat for us as a fan, like retrospectively, knowing what's coming and hearing those seeds. Yeah, because the whole idea of what improvisation means to them is changing. Like, it's not just keeping up with crazy solos and call and response in a type 1 framework. They're really experimenting with pulling away from a song entirely. And even more than that, it doesn't matter which song or where within that song.
Right. Exactly.
And to that point, up next is It's Ice, which is as tight as it will ever be, as it is in 1993.
Yeah. I mean, this is a great version. Yeah. It's great. I got it again in 30 years later, which I was very surprised to hear, and it was pretty good. I mean, I listened to it the other night. It was a lot slower than this version, but it was still great.
Yeah, well, yeah, we can't say enough. It can't be emphasized enough about how fast and how quick the tempo is through every song here. And
Yeah,
Fishman,
yeah, he either has a date or someone complains he was too fast at the last show and he was going to show them up. I have no idea which one of those is true, but like he plays fast at every point.
yeah.
He's not letting up. So I feel like somebody told him he was playing too fast. And then he was gonna show.
Well, they had to slow it down, I guess, because the next two songs to close the set were Lawn Boy and then Cavern. So I wrote
Yep.
for Lawn Boy, it's goofy fun. And even though this set is fairly short, it feels very satisfying.
Oh yeah, and I mean, because if I can because the first 5 songs were like boom. I don't even think they paused and they took a little break. I mean, not a break, but it's like silent, and then sort of the meat of the set, and then this is the next break with Lawn Boy. And at that point, I mean, I had no reference point for it, and I was like, oh, and they do lounge sets, so that's kind of how I took it as done, and thought it was awesome. The greatest thing. I mean, I was like, this is perfect. This is perfect.
Yeah, they're really starting to sharpen their set lists and the flow of a show to meet these larger venues. Because when you have more
Right.
than, I don't know, before this, they were playing what, between 700 and 1,500 seat venues, like mostly theaters. When you have a wide open venue in front of you, you got to change it up a little bit.
Yeah, definitely.
And they close with Cavern, which is kind of the ultimate constant. Like it's always closing the
Yes.
first set.
And I feel like I may have known that song. That may have been the one other song I knew. I don't know how, but maybe I knew that one. But yeah, great version. Again, solid, solid, solid. I mean, the thing is, like, this whole show, you could just be like solid, solid, solid. But like I said, from sitting 10 feet away, you're just like attendance bias galore.
Hi, everybody. Brian here to welcome you to the set break of today's episode of Attendance Bias. First, thank you for listening. And second, just a quick reminder to tell you that even though Attendance Bias comes to you for free, it does take a lot of work and it does take quite a bit of money to keep the lights on here at production. So I just wanted to ask a small favor if you could support the podcast in any number of the following ways. If you could leave a review or a rating of it on whichever podcast app you use. If you could spread the word, telling a friend or someone you think may be interested in it about it. Or probably the most concrete way is to go to www.buymeacoffee.com/attendancebias and donate however much you can financially to help with the continuing costs of Attendance Bias. So thank you again so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the second half of today's episode.
Set 2.
And to our earlier point, set 2 begins with 2001. It was back to when 2001 was a 3-minute set opener.
Yeah. I mean, I would have known it, like, to me, I would have known it as the disco version. Like, to me, I'd been like, oh, they're going to do disco. Like, that's how I would have taken it, like, from my perspective at that time, because I would have known that version, the late 70s version, 2001. And I mean, I would have known it from, obviously, but I was just, again, pleasantly surprised and pleased at what they were doing.
Yeah, it's good. It's tight. It's small, but it gets the job done. It kicks off the rest of the set, which goes right into Poor Heart, which is, again, another unusual pairing.
Yeah, but sounds great. I mean, it's just all work. And they're going back. Again, a great version, fast, tight. Everything in the show is just tight. Yeah.
Speaking of tight, though, next is your song. The one that's sprung you into here is Run Like an Antelope.
Yeah. So now, the dream is complete. Because I would not have even known, all I knew is I wanted to hear Antelope that night. I mean, I had no idea they played set list every night. I mean, I probably could have figured out if I had known. He probably been like, yeah, you're probably going to get an Antelope tonight. But I had no idea that was going to happen. And when it did, there was the person who existed before that. And then there was the person who existed after that Antelope. That's all I can say about that.
It's so funny you say that, because one of my notes was summer 1993 Antelopes could be life-altering.
Yeah, that one was definitely life-altering. definitely life altering. Just go listen to it. That's all I can say.
Yeah, everyone should. It starts with Fishman focusing on his small, high-pitched toms, which he used to do a little bit more often, like playing around with the intro was a big part of Antelope, before they get into the regular two-chord meaty part, the middle of the song. The whole intro could be a song all by itself, which it kind of is here. It's insane.
Yeah, I mean, it's insane. I mean, I would say it sticks close to what's on the album, but it does it at a way that's like turned up to 15. So it's like, for my, like, I was like, oh, I know this. Like, it's not like they're going too far outside of what would be like the prototypical, but what they are doing inside of that framework is scrambled my brain.
Right. Even within that framework, it'll scramble your brain. Yeah, and I even thought, I wrote down, this is the type of Antelope I fell in love with.
Right. It's just like ferocious over.
And I don't know if you heard this, but toward the end, when they get into the Rye Rocco part, when they kind of screech to a stop, there's this crazy guitar insanity. And I wrote the word botches. I don't know if that's true, but they kind of botched the transition to the Rye Rocco. Yeah. And they get into
like I said,
chord. Yeah.
I mean, I would have had no reference point at that point. So to me, it would have felt, because when you listen to it, I don't think you could, like, if you hadn't heard any other version, you wouldn't know it was botched.
Right. You don't know what you don't know.
Right. Exactly.
And there's a part right after that when they go into Rye Rocco, they kind of run with that little, I'm just going to keep saying the word botched, even though it sounds
right.
I'm just going to go with it.
I know it's, yes, yeah. It is. It's a rather unusual little like progression they do there. And then they kind of just, okay, here we go. It's almost like, oops. And then we're going to fill in the space. And then here we go. Back up. But everything at any point, they just keep forward. That's what this show feels to me the whole time. It's just we're moving forward.
Right. And it might be crazy. I might be looking for what I want to see or hear, but there's a part toward that section that sounds not too far from Carini, but that just might be.
I saw that. No, I saw that in the notes. And then when I listened back to it the second time, I heard what you were hearing. Yes, it is there. It is there.
Okay, good. And then after Antelope is my 13-year-old self was so thrilled because the album that I fell in love with to get me into Phish was A Picture of Nectar. And this song,
Right.
maybe the most rare song of that whole album, they played Fat.
Right. Which at the time I had no reference to what it is. And all of a sudden, here comes the the drummer lumbering down from behind his set, and he's going to sit on. I feel like he had a little stool, and the guitar. Someone else was there, could be like, "You're totally making this up," but that's how I remember it. And it was on a little stand, and I was like, I don't know what's happening. This is another part of the show. Okay, here we go. I mean, I was ready for anything at that point. That's, I guess, what I realized, because, like I said before, it was 5 years until I'd see another show. But when I came back, it was like, oh, of course, they do this because they do everything. So it wouldn't matter what they did.
And just some statistics so we could get ahead of the fact check a little bit. Thought has been played just 12 times ever. And to date, at the time of this recording, it hasn't been played since December 2nd, 1995. So if you caught it, you it's a little feather in your cap, Jonathan, for your stat check.
I guess so.
Right?
They should bring it back. People would love it. I mean,
yes.
You can hear it on the tape, people screaming, "Fishman!" Like, "Oh, go Fishman!"
And
I remember that.
Yeah, and after Fat is My Friend, which Fat actually melts right into it, even with the sound effects playing in the background.
I remember that because I remember the birds, and I remember, like I said, I was slightly altered, and I remember being like, "Am I hearing the birds? Is everyone hearing the birds? All doing the bird thing?" But yes, the birds are on the recording, and I feel like, well, this will get later. You can hear. I feel like they bring the birds back in Yep, but I don't know. You can listen back and see what you think.
And after My Friend, which is another kind of acoustic guitar intro where Trey goes back over to the electric.
Exactly. So I don't remember if he hopped back on like the stand. Like, that's the part I cannot remember for the life of me how that all went, because it's all seamless,
Yeah,
like,
you wouldn't know just by listening to it. Yeah.
Right. But yeah, because so Fishman's there, and then he jumps there, and then he's onto the electric. But they should do, I love it with the acoustic. So, I think they should do more acoustic in the shows. But
me too. And
they're not going to listen to me.
Yeah, but how lucky are we to have an FM recording, like a soundboard recording of this acoustic guitar playing?
Oh yeah, it's great. That was the other thing. I guess the thing I got out of this show when I was thinking back on it was just like, when I saw them later, was sort of this, like, they have this supernatural connection. But with this show, it's just practice, practice, practice. Like, these are 4 guys who are in sync just through repetition. They are not going to miss a note, and it's kind of crazy.
After My Friend is Uncle Pen, and then the Big Ball Jam. I have to ask, the Big Ball Jam is kind of the ultimate attendance bias song, because when you're listening to it on tape, it doesn't do anything. What was it like? Was it fun to see it?
I think it went over my head at the time. I swear. I think I was like, somebody is up on stage, they're throwing balls. This is probably upsetting the band. What are we doing? And then I feel like I finally caught on. I think somebody tried to steal a ball, and a ball went over the edge. I think this is when they realized it's not going to work in an amphitheater, because balls would just sort of, it's too big of a space. I think that's why it was phased out quickly. So I remember there being a yellow balloon, but other than that,
That's such a New
it was
York thing to do.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, there's a balloon, whatever. Let's go.
Right. Yeah. Thanks.
So yeah, that I don't remember well, and I can see probably why it was phased out, because I think it doesn't work in the larger environment probably as well.
And after the Big Ball Jam is an amazing sequence, at least to me. You Enjoy Myself into Big Black Furry Creatures from Mars. And they do not go back into You Enjoy Myself. There's no vocal jam.
Oh yeah, which I did not know existed at the time. And if they had gone into a vocal jam, I probably would have been seriously bummed out, because I don't think I would have enjoyed that at the time. Now I enjoy it, but at the time, I don't think I would have liked that. So I didn't know it was an option, and I'm glad I didn't get it.
Yeah, I would be the same with you. I'm not a big fan of the vocal jam now, though. But just the same, I just thought, how often does this happen? Probably never again. I'll check.
Right. I'm not sure. You'll have to fact check that, but I don't think that. But you can hear, like, that's in the end is the first time that there's not like intentionality in the show. It feels like a bit to me of like a struggle of like where we're gonna go. But then also there's some patience, and they get there, and then it's really great. And then they're like, we're going to go into like, so I don't know, I mean, to me, I love it. I think it's great. I think it's a nice patient build to something, and then they just kick it into something else. It sounds cool to me.
Yeah, me too. And then we're already at the end of the set, or at least, owning in on it. There's Chalked as Torture, which is a classic, with a unusual Crimes of the Mind jam.
So apparently he was, because if you look, he sound checked with them, I think, for this show.
Okay.
So apparently, I think he was supposed to perform, but I don't think the dude abided, and I don't think he made it back. So I think that we missed out, because they do. I think that's what the jam in the song is like. Wherever you are, man, you missed your shot.
So Chalked as Torture is excellent, and then they play Crimes of the Mind right in the middle of it.
Yeah, I mean, great version. I mean, just a fiery, like everything is very just on point. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it. It's fast, it's hot, it's on point. That's it. If you like it, if you want to dance to this.
Yeah. And then they close the second set with Highway to Hell, which is a rarity. It's a fan favorite. And the first thought I had, because I haven't listened to a show with this song in a long time, but my thought is, by all rights, they shouldn't be able to pull this one off.
No, they shouldn't, but they totally 100% did. I mean, I remember at the moment being like, because that wasn't, what year is Highway to Hell? That's not that old of a song in 1993, is it?
No,
I'm getting totally confused.
Yeah,
is that on 88? I think
probably.
Like 87, 88. So to me, that I took it as like a joke, like ironic. I don't know how I took it at the time. I'm not sure. It might be ironic, but they're playing it straight, and it's great. Like, I mean, that's the thing with Phish. It's like they can get you both ways.
Well, yeah, I agree. It's like, I've said this before on this podcast, but it's like when you're in a band with your friends and you just try to learn all of your favorite songs, and in my case, all your favorite classic rock songs, and you're not good enough.
Right. But it's like a song like this is like, on one hand, it's like, this is like arena rock, but at the same time, like, who wouldn't want to get on stage and play this song with all their friends, or whatever they want to consider the Phish fan, like at this big party? Like, who doesn't want to play Highway to Hell? This is fantastic.
Right. And the same thing goes for, they didn't play this at this show, but same thing could be said for Good Times, Bad Times. I mean, who doesn't want to be Led Zeppelin at Madison Square Garden?
Exactly.
Yeah, they kill it. And then the encore is, again, you talk about all these different styles, is Amazing Grace, just in case they hadn't made it clear already that they can do anything.
Right. And then the juxtaposition of, of like the Highway to Hell, and then we're going to come back out. And not only in the encore, in the 5 minutes we've been gone, we've found God. Here we come. Amazing Grace. Let's do it. From debauchery to salvation in 5 minutes. So you get the whole arc.
And you could hear on this recording, you could hear fans shouting for Freebird. And it's at a point where the venue is so large that the shushers in the audience have to give up. And the band itself has to say, thanks, guys, you have to be quiet for this one. Like, they're the shushers now.
I wasn't sure, like, first of all, So when they're shouting Freebird, so I don't like, from my perspective, I think they're kidding, because already in 1993, like, people shouting Freebird at a rock concert is just a thing people do, is like a joke.
Yeah.
But obviously, for Phish fans who knew more than I did, it was a probability that they might do an a cappella version of Freebird. And then I think they were genuine in shushing people, because was this the first time they did Amazing Grace, or one of the first few times they did it?
I'll have to check. I thought that they played it in the early 90s when they were doing unmiked a cappella, but I'll check.
But I mean, like, so it might have been, so I'm not sure, but they might have genuinely been like, hey, this one's not going to be Freebird. This is going to be a quiet one. So he sounds genuine to me. I don't think he's kidding.
And then they closed the whole show with Daniel Saw the Stone, which is an interesting choice to close, but I'll take it anytime they want to play it.
Yeah, I mean, I remember in the moment being disappointed and because I was like, this is not I'm not going to get what I want out of this song, but I was fine with it. It was fantastic. At that moment, like, I could see how hard these guys had worked the last 2 hours. And it was like, these are the hardest working guys in children.
Yeah.
Like, no joke. Like, whatever other bands you love, and like these guys care about music more than anybody else who's in the audience right now. So, like, they want this show to be better than anybody else here. And, like, that's what you got from them. I was like, I want to see this band any chance I get. That's all I need.
Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for taking the time to bring up an old classic show that is, if not unknown, at least underappreciated, I would think, during a summer that is rightfully appreciated, and giving us the ins and outs of a band in flux right before they reached one of their top peaks. So I really appreciate you not only choosing this show, but really taking us on the inside and telling us what it was like to be there. It's the bane of this podcast. So it was great talking to you.
Well, I had a great time. It was awesome. And anytime, I'll come back. I have another show.
And that's it for today's conversation with Jonathan Frederic. And although we both loved today's show, that doesn't mean that we didn't get a few things wrong. So now it's time for corrections with the attendance bias fact check.
Attendance bias fact check.
At the time of this recording, Phish has played the Jones Beach Amphitheater 16 times. Today's show in 1993 was the third time, but Jonathan was right. It was their first solo headlining spot. They previously played the outdoor venue on July 12th, 1992 as part of the Horde Tour, and also July 24th, 1992, opening for Santana. At the time that this show was played, the capacity for the Jones Beach Amphitheater was 11,200. The venue was renovated in 1998 to add the mezzanine, which increased the capacity to 15,000. I mentioned a few times that the band had recently released the album Rift. I was way off though, as this show was played in July, and Rift, the album, was released in early February of 1993. Although You Enjoy Myself into Big Black Furry Creatures from Mars is an odd pairing, this was not the only time it happened. According to Phish.net, the pairing and the segue was also played on Halloween 1987 at Goddard College in the Sculpture Room, November 8th, 1990 at the Great Hall at the University of Wisconsin, and on November 3rd, 1994 at the Mullins Center at UMass Amherst. Jonathan is correct. According to Phish.com, Crimes of the Mind was soundchecked at this show with Steve Pollock, aka the Dude of Life. Interestingly, the Dude would sing Crimes of the Mind with Phish on November 28, 2003 at the Nassau Coliseum, which is just a few miles north of Jones Beach in Uniondale, Long Island. For the record, Highway to Hell, the song and the album, was released by AC/DC in 1979. And finally, Phish debuted Amazing Grace on February 2nd, 1993 at the Portland Expo. And that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank Jonathan Frederic for joining me today, Phish.net for its help with the fact check, the Mockingbird Foundation for everything it does to help with music education for children, and Phish.in for the recording used in today's episode. If you enjoy Attendance Bias, please support the show. You can do that by visiting www.buymeacoffee.com/attendancebias and donating anything you can. You can also follow Attendance Bias on social media. Thank you again so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on Attendance Bias.